to start off by introducing our speakers for today. So Heather Lamb has years of work experience in the disabilities field and also volunteers for a number of initiatives promoting accessibility. Heather earned her master's in social work from UNBC in Prince George and has worked for SCI BC for more than 12 years. As SCI BC's InfoLine service lead, Heather handles InfoLine calls from clients who may need assistance over long term or who are dealing with multiple issues related to their disability. She works with families and individuals who are new to spinal cord injury, as well as individuals who were injured many years ago. Heather has been visually impaired since birth and is passionate about addressing ableism in society and pursuing social justice for people with disabilities. And Barry, who will be joining her in this presentation, with over 5 years of banking experience. Barry also a part-time bachelor's in business administration student at BCIT, drawing from 14 plus years of lived experience with a spinal cord injury. He brings a unique experience grounded in perseverance, resilience, and strong understanding of accessibility. So thank you for joining us all today, and I'll pass it on to Heather to go ahead with the presentation.
Great, thank you, Agasha, and welcome everyone. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a brief presentation about the basics that everybody should know about financial options with spinal cord injury. And then there will be time for Barry to talk about his lived experience with his banking background. And then we'll both be available to take any questions that people have towards the end. Okay, so I'll start with the brief caveat that funding questions are complex, and I might not be able to answer every single one of them during the presentation. If that's the case, I'm happy to take your information and get back to people later with a more comprehensive answer. I'm knowledgeable about funding, but I am not a tax or a legal expert. So if I give you information, it will be correct information, and I will tell you if it's something that I don't know the answer to, or if you need to go to another expert for that particular type of information. Okay, so we'll start with an overview of the types of income that people might receive after their spinal cord injury. Now, many of you might be past the point of being eligible for medical EI if you've been injured for a while, but if there's anybody new on the call, this might be relevant. So after an injury, most people who are employed at the type of injury or at the time of their injury may be eligible for medical EI, which gives you a bit of a bridge while you're dealing with the injury, gives you some time to sort out your other funding options. So it's always worth checking with Service Canada or with your employer to see if you qualify. So the other longer term options are as follows. PWD is the funder of last resort. That's what the BC government calls it. But it's for people who don't have another funding source or who are quite low income. So their other funding has them below the level offered by PWD, which is about just under $1,500 per month for a single person. If you're eligible for PWD, you're going to be a person who has less than $100,000 in the bank or in assets, but that excludes things like the RDSP, which we'll talk about in a minute. It also excludes your home and your first vehicle, as well as certain types of trusts. So it's not 100,000 firm, it's 100,000 in bank accounts and related assets. So for PWD, the application process is that you have to have a doctor sign off. They do quite a comprehensive section on your medical situation, your diagnosis, your prognosis, the type of treatments that you have. Anybody who's a full-time wheelchair user will probably qualify for PWD based on the changes to your mobility. People with incomplete injuries, it's a little bit harder to qualify, but still possible depending on what's going on with your situation. And there's a second section to that application that can be filled in by another medical doctor or the same doctor, occupational therapist, social worker, physiotherapist. If you go through GF Strong, this is often done while you're there by the staff, but it can also be done in the community later on. And of course, if you have any questions about that application, don't hesitate to ask. CPP disability is for people who have been working and have paid into Canada Pension Plan. This is the portion of the plan that's available to people under the age of 65 who have a significant disability that impacts their ability to do any kind of work. So that eligibility is important. If you could do a different kind of work, they're probably not going to accept you. But if you're significantly restricted in the type of work that you can do, there's a possibility of qualifying for CPP disability. Again, there's quite a lengthy application process that requires a doctor to sign off. Again, for full-time wheelchair users, it's a simpler process, not guaranteed, but it is a little bit simpler. People with the ambulatory or incomplete injuries, it's a little bit harder to qualify because you have to explain the impact on your ability to work. And it's doable, but you do need your doctor to explain that in a fair amount of detail. And a lot of people for both of these two are denied the first time around. It's worth reapplying or appealing the decision because people are often accepted the second time around with additional information. So CPP disability has the advantage that you could potentially make a little bit more per month than on PWD. The downside is that there's no extended medical coverage. So if you need funding for things like catheters or wheelchair and related items, you will not get coverage for those on CPP disability, but you will get basic coverage on PWD. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both of them. It's basically whichever one you qualify for is the one you go for. For those people who are injured either at work or as part of car accident, there is coverage through WorkSafe BC or ICBC. Your income can be replaced. And of course, you can also get funding for your catheters, your wheelchairs, potentially for home renovations, possibly vehicles. We'll talk about all of that. So in those cases, talk to your case manager. Neither one is a quick or easy process. But with both ones, you do have to advocate. And at times you may have to go above your case manager's head to get some movement happening. But there should be a fairly decent level of coverage through both of those if you qualify. The other option, if you were working at the time of your injury, but don't qualify for the other ones, you may be eligible for long-term disability through your employer, depending on what your benefits said. In this case, talk to your HR manager at your workplace, and they should be able to give you details on the plan, put you in touch with your insurance company, and see whether or not you qualify. And what happens when you turn 65? So many of these end at 65. So CPP disability ends at 65. You transition to regular CPP. Same with PWD. The payments from the provincial government end at 65, and you transition to CPP if you qualify, as well as old age security, which pretty much all older Canadians get, and the guaranteed income supplement, which is for lower income Canadians. If you were on PWD, you will likely qualify for that as well. The nice thing about PWD is your equipment and catheter funding can continue after 65 as long as your income stays low, which it will if you're on the OAS and the GIS. But unfortunately, with some of the others, your equipment coverage will end at 65. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about the future. It's not right, it's not good, but it is the reality that many people lose their coverage at that age. Okay, so moving on, taxes. First thing is to file your taxes every year, even if your income is very low, because it makes you eligible for a number of potential benefits and refunds. And it's the entryway into a lot of potential income options. So the first one is the disability tax credit. Again, most full-time wheelchair users will qualify for the disability tax credit. Ambulatory wheelchair users may or may not. It might be a slightly harder argument to make, but it is possible. So this is one where your doctor has to sign off on it and send it into the provincial government, sorry, the federal government. There is quite a wait time for these right now, but definitely get it in as soon as possible and make sure that it's backdated to the date of your injury, because you can potentially get some tax money back from previous years, especially if you or your partner had a higher income in previous years after the date of your injury. you may get some of that money back, which can obviously make a big difference for people. The disability tax credit is the entryway into the registered disability savings plan, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. It's also required for some of your medical deductions, not all of them, but make sure you're claiming every medical expense that you have that's an out-of-pocket expense, including for home renovations. There's a few programs where you can get a little bit of money back on your taxes each year. Again, it depends on how much you're paying in taxes. If your income is quite low, you're not going to get much back, but it's worth claiming it anyway because every little bit makes a difference. So moving on to equipment and supplies, most of you probably already know this. Unfortunately, catheters are not well funded in BC. So you can get the funding through a third party, such as your employer if you're working, your extended health if you were working, and your long-term disability benefits include extended health. Some do, some don't. If you're covered through ICBC or WorkSafe, you should have catheter funding through there. And if you're on PWD, you will get basic catheters covered. However, if you're on CPP disability, there is no catheter funding, or if you're otherwise low income but don't quite qualify for PWD, you will be on your own for this for these payments, which is really unfortunate. There are advocacy efforts underway to try and get this changed, but it's a wait and see game at this point. So things like wheelchairs, similar to the above, are funded through either your third-party insurance, your extended health, or a PWD. Again, no funding through CPP disability for wheelchairs. There are a couple of foundations, such as BC Rehab or the Kinsman, the Provincial Kinsman Foundation, that can help with some of this funding for basic mobility devices. They do sometimes fund other things like recreation devices, but not always. The SCI BC Marketplace is another option for slightly less expensive used equipment. Difficult if you have particular seating needs. It's hard to find the exact right match at the right time, but keep it in mind as an option, particularly for equipment that doesn't need to be fitted quite as carefully. It is a way of getting some slightly cheaper equipment. And again, at 65, as I mentioned, the coverage will end on many of these plans. So if you're on PWD, your coverage will continue. If your income remains low, if you're on CPP disability, there's no funding as you move to CPP. If you're on WorkSafe or ICBC, talk to your case manager to read the fine print and see what they say. And similar with an extended health plan through your employer. Some end at 65 or when you quit your job. Some of them might continue. The older generation, like my parents' generation, their funding continued into retirement. That is not typically the case now, but it is worth asking the question. Okay, moving on to some other health funding. So for those of you who require physio visits or chiropractor or occupational therapist for things that are not covered through the public system, if your income remains low, you can get a certain number of visits per year covered. But that said, there's a caveat here. The visits are capped at $23 per visit, and these professionals often charge a lot more than that $23. So yes, it helps, but it's not nearly as good as full coverage. So it's a little bit misleading when they say that they cover these visits. They cover a tiny percentage. But again, it is worth claiming the money if you can. And that will continue after 65 if your income stays low. So for vehicles, again, most of you probably know this, there is no coverage for adaptations for vehicles through either PWD, CPP or CPP disability. If you're covered through ICBC or WorkSafe, you may have coverage for the vehicle adaptations. Ask your case manager, and it's worth putting some pressure on them to try and get those covered because they are covered for many people under those programs. There is a program through WorkBC Assistive Technology Services, which is run with Neil Squire, that does, excuse me, currently offer funding for adaptations for vehicles, not the cost of the vehicle themselves. However, at this point, That program is set to run out of money sometime next year. So get your applications in as soon as possible if you qualify, because we don't know if that money is going to be renewed. The main caveat with this particular program is you need to have the vehicle either for work, for a confirmed job offer, or in order to keep your existing work. And that includes the need to get to and from your workplace, not just during the workday. So again, if you have a job and you need a vehicle to get to and from work, get your application in as quickly as possible for this one, because that money could be running out next year. And it does take quite a bit of time to go through the process. SCI BC Marketplace is a good option for vehicles as well. Again, they're not going to be cheap, but they will be a little bit cheaper than new ones. And you'll see, at least you'll see a wide range of the types of vehicles that are available, the types of adaptations that people use, and the amount of money that people are asking for them. There's a few small benefits programs for vehicle funding as well. So there's gas tax rebates through the provincial and federal governments that can save you a little bit of money per year. Provincially, it's about $500, which again isn't a huge amount, but it all adds up and helps out. And there is a small discount on your basic auto plan through ICBC, as long as you're a full-time wheelchair user. Okay, so moving on to other transportation options for people who are not driving or who are transitioning into not driving. Sometimes as people get older, they choose not to drive for various reasons. So HandyDart is the door-to-door shared service run through either TransLink or BC Transit, depending on where you are in the province. It requires an application, and in most cases, they do want to see a doctor's note, although some of us got onto HandyDart without needing a doctor's note, so it's not applied consistently across the board, but be aware that you could be asked to provide proof of disability. That one it's a good option, particularly in the winter if you're struggling to move around in the snow or the ice or the darkness, or for places that the bus doesn't go, but you do have to book ahead. So it's not good for last minute trips, and it can often take quite a bit longer than taking a taxi. The advantage, of course, is that it's quite inexpensive. And if you qualify for HandyDart, you can also get taxi savers in many BC communities. And that's where you can buy a set of tickets for use on a taxi, and you effectively get double that amount of money when you use the taxi, up to a certain amount per month. Of course, there is a limit to it, depending on where you are. For people on PWD or people who are over 60 and low income, there is a bus pass available provincially, which can be used on either TransLink or BC Transit. If you're traveling out of your home community for medical reasons, there's a few options. If you're needing to take the ferry to a medical appointment, you can get pretty significant discounts on ferry travel. Doesn't work as well as for those of us in the interior, because the discounts on the flights are on regular price flights, and you can usually get cheaper versions if you wait for a seat sale. Parts of the interior have bus transportation for a very small amount of money. It's quite highly subsidized by the provincial government to and from your closest larger community. So all over the north, there's bus routes that they come into Prince George for appointments, and also between Prince George, Kamloops, and Vancouver. And I think there's some in the interior as well. So there are a few different options. If you need to go somewhere that isn't covered by the previous ones I've mentioned, there's an organization called Hope Air that will cover the cost of airline transportation, sometimes hotels as well, for people who are low income and need to travel for medical appointments. There is an application process required for that one with an income verification. And for general travel, if you are taking the ferry regularly, it's worth it to get the ferry pass. You do need a doctor's note for the first time that you apply, and you have to renew it every second year. Now that's a new renewal, but you don't need the doctor's note each time, just to renew the actual application. So a few different options to cut costs a little bit on your transportation. So a few other funding options. There's the new Canada Disability Benefit, which is available for what they call working age adults. So it's up to the age of 64. This one provides up to $200 per month for anybody who qualifies for the disability tax credit, with the caveat that it is somewhat dependent on your family income. So if you or your partner are working, you'll probably not get the full $200 per month, but people who are on PWD, for example, would get the full 200 and it will not be clawed back by the BC government. So I would encourage everybody who has the disability tax credit to apply for this one. It's a very simple online application or phone call, and they'll let you know pretty quickly whether or not you qualify. It's not a huge amount of money, but it all helps a little bit. The RDSP is a savings plan for people who qualify for the disability tax credit. This is a nice one, especially for younger people, because the government will put in matching grants up to a certain amount of money to match what you put in each year. So you can potentially get quite a bit of extra money for your retirement on this one. And it is a tax, well, not tax free, it's a tax deferred place to put your money. If you have a little bit of extra or you have rich relatives who want to contribute, it gives you a little bit of a cushion for retirement. Obviously, not super helpful for people who are low income, but it can help a little bit for people who have a tiny bit of extra. The Canada Dental Plan is another fairly new one. This one offers some coverage for dental care for people who don't already have a dental plan. So if you have a dental plan through your workplace, for example, don't cancel it because you're not going to qualify for the Canada Dental Plan. It's only available for people who don't currently have a plan. With the exception of people who are on PWD, you can get a top up for what PWD will provide. The two programs will work together for people in that situation. So again, there's an application process. And your coverage will somewhat depend on your income, but most people will qualify for some help. And it does give partial coverage for some of the dental work or dental cleanings that people might need. Make sure you check with your dentist, though, to see whether or not they actually accept this particular plan. Okay, moving on to people who are homeowners. So there are a couple of federal and provincial tax breaks for accessibility renovations, particularly helpful if you do have a reasonable income. You'll be able to get a little bit of money back. There's also the BC, oh goodness, I always forget these acronyms because they change them every couple of years. It's a renovation funding program through BC Housing, and it is also available for renters, obviously with your landlord approval, to make accessibility renovations to your home. So things like a ramp into your home or putting in a wheel-in shower, those type of things, up to $20,000 is available. The major downside of this particular program is that you have to apply for it with quotes from contractors. You have to be approved. You have to get the work done by the contractor, pay the contractor out of your pocket, and then seek reimbursement from the government, which can take a little bit of time. So you have to have the money available upfront to make that payment and then wait for your reimbursement. That's obviously a fairly major barrier for a lot of our members. And it's one that we're making government aware of, but it hasn't been changed yet. The homeowners grant is one where you can save a little bit of money on your property taxes every year. So there's the regular grant that anybody who lives in their own home can qualify for. There's extra deductions or, sorry, discounts if you are either a senior or you have a disability. It's one or the other, and they're basically equal. So the seniors one is easier to qualify for because it's only based on age. If you're younger and you have a disability, you do need to show that you've done some disability renovations or that you meet one of a number of characteristics, such as being on PWD, that kind of thing. But you only need to make that application once, and then you can just apply the discount every year. Property tax deferment is a helpful one for people who have a more expensive home but don't have a lot of ready cash to pay for daily living needs. You can apply to not pay your property tax for the foreseeable future. And then when you sell your home or when you die, your estate will pay it. Your property tax gets paid at that time. So it's not that you don't ever pay it, it's just that you don't have to pay it this year. There's obviously some other criteria there, but it's a nice one if you need some ready cash and you have a home that's worth enough to make the deduction worthwhile. There is no funding for repairs, however, other than for accessibility renovations, unless you're living on reserve. So a few options for your home care, which can add up pretty quickly. So private agency care, there's a wide range of options out there, but also a wide range of costs. You're typically looking at about $40 per hour minimum through a company, and they usually have a 2-hour minimum per visit. And keep in mind that not all the staff who work for these agencies are trained in spinal cord injury specific care. So you may need to ask for a higher level of qualification in order to get some of your bowel and bladder care done. They're typically trained for the typical issues that a senior might need, such as help with a shower. So that's the thing to be aware of, is what level of assistance they're able to provide. Of course, you can hire independently. You can hire anybody you want to be your caregiver if you're paying out of pocket, but the potential for high turnover is there. Also, keep in mind things like whether or not there's going to be any coverage if they get injured on the job. If you're not, if you don't have coverage through WorkSafe BC and they get injured in your home, there's potential ramifications for your insurance, and potentially they could come after you and sue you. So something to be aware of. Lots of people do it and they do it safely, but it is something to be aware of. Whereas if you hire through a company, yes, you're paying more, but they also cover the WorkSafe costs should something happen. And then, of course, there's the public care that probably more people are using because it's cheaper. Um, so the two main options for home care are home support and Cecil. Both have a daily rate based on your income level. So if you're on PWD, there is no daily rate that you have to pay. Your home care or your Cecil will come to you at no cost. And the daily rate is capped at $300 per month if you're working. But the second that you stop working, whether because of retirement or other reasons, it will then be based on your income. So if you have a higher pension, and I'm not talking about a high pension, just slightly higher, you will be paying potentially thousands for your daily rate. So that's where you might want to consider hiring privately. It might actually end up being cheaper. You'd have to run some numbers. Again, it's a gap in our system, and it's one that the Seniors Advocate is working on behalf of seniors in our province, but it would certainly benefit our membership as well if we could get these rules changed. We'll see. So a few options in terms of living and what the relative costs are. So where you're living right now is probably the best place for the moment. And that could be your own home, whether you own or you rent. For those people who are lower income, BC housing is a cheaper option, but wait lists are long. So obviously you have to budget on how to manage until you can get to the top of those wait lists. And co-op housing is a really good option in some parts of the province, but there aren't very many subsidies in co-ops anymore. So again, they tend to be very slightly cheaper than market rent, but we don't have the subsidies that we used to have for this option. As people get older or their care needs increase, they might want to look at assisted living, which can be either public or private. So, assisted living typically will have help with housekeeping and laundry. Not always your personal laundry, but they'll usually do your sheets and your towels and do some light housekeeping, and they usually provide meals. Assisted living, if you're looking at public, is 70% of your income, and that would cover your rent, your housekeeping, your meals, and that's kind of it. So you would still have to pay for all of your clothing, wheelchairs, catheters, that kind of thing would still be out of pocket, as well as a phone, a computer, internet, and obviously entertainment and anything else that you value. So it's not a cheap option, but when it gets to the point that people need that level of care, it's sometimes the better option for them. Private assisted living can run anywhere from 4,000 up to many, many thousands of dollars per month. So the upside is that there's no wait lists and you can choose, you have more choice about where you live, but it's quite a bit more expensive than the public version. And long-term care is what we think of as nursing homes or complex care. And this is for people who have higher level of care needs. Again, can be public or private. public has wait lists and less choice, and you're looking at 80% of your income would be going to your facility. Private, again, could be anywhere from $5,000 or $6,000 up to many, many thousands of dollars per month. So these are things to think about when you're looking at your future care options. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that for some people, assisted living and long-term care are actually cheaper than paying out of pocket for home care as well as rent. So again, that's a choice that people have to make, but it's not, there isn't always a good answer there. Okay, so moving on to a couple of discount programs that are available. If you like to fish, there's a cheap fishing license available for people with disabilities. Access to entertainment offers cheaper access to certain entertainment venues in BC. There aren't very many. I expect we're going to see more of these disability discounts as the Accessible BC Act regulations roll out over the next few years. So keep an eye out for that. But it's always worth asking for cheaper admission or free admission for caregivers. Some venues do it, some don't. And you can also ask about discounts for internet or cell phone. Those are typically quite basic plans that they'll offer a discount for either seniors or people with disabilities. Some of them require an income verification process. So it can be a bit of work to access. But if you have relatively basic needs for those items, they can be an option to save a little bit of money. And I always put this onto financial decision making workshops. You need to make sure that your documents are in order. So, what documents am I talking about? The first one is your will. This is what happens after you die to make sure that your assets and your dependents are taken care of and that your wishes are followed. Even if you don't care what happens after you die, please do this for the sake of your family members who will have to deal with things. Having seen a variety of people over the years who've died without a will, it's quite difficult for the family to navigate through this when there's no document telling them what to do. It becomes legally quite difficult and a lot more work for them. So please get a will. Power of attorney, this is for while you are alive. And this is for legal and financial decision making. So if you're not able to make decisions because of advanced dementia or you have stroke or you're in a serious accident, a power of attorney allows your bills to be paid, your bank accounts to be accessed, and decisions to be made just to take care of things either temporarily or permanently while you're not able to. Again, it makes things a lot easier for your family if this is written down ahead of time. And a representation agreement is for healthcare and personal care decision making. And you can add a few financial decision making aspects into your rep agreement. Your better option is to get the power of attorney as well. The rep agreement is basically anything and everything related to your healthcare, personal care, and where you live. So, again, if you find yourself unable to make those decisions, what would you want in that situation? Choose somebody who knows you well, who can make those decisions on your behalf and get those documents in order. You don't have to have a lawyer to do these documents. There's a variety of kits that you can order. You can do it online. You can get a notary to help as long as it's witnessed by somebody. But if you have complicated situations or families who are likely to fight about your decision making, or if you have dependents like children that you're taking care of, please get it done properly with a lawyer just to protect everybody involved. Okay, and if you have further questions, of course, you can always contact Infoline. We're really good at digging out information, and we're happy to spend lots of time figuring out what your options are and working through them with you. So that's our contact information. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it over to Barry for his lived experience perspective. Barry, over to you. And then we'll take questions after.
Thanks, Heather. So just I know Heather shared a lot with everyone today, but just a few reminders for everyone that probably the first suggestion that I would have is to keep your income tax filings up to date. It is pretty much essential to because so many support programs, benefits, financial services rely on accurate income information, which is based on your income tax filing. It um, it also ensures you receive the correct amounts, avoid delays, and stay prepared for opportunities that can improve your financial stability. Because, as you all know, affordability is a major challenge for anyone living with a disability. Navigating costs, as you know, can feel very overwhelming. So, understanding available supports and resources can make a really big difference to you. So that would be my first tip. Also, depending on your income, you may qualify to access free tax clinics in your community. For example, there is the Disability Alliance of BC. They assist people with low income file their income taxes. So that is another point that I'd like to share. And just a quick plug for the RDSP, the Registered Disability Savings Plan program. Depending on your income and contributions, you may qualify for what they call government bonds and grants, and you can qualify up to the age of 49. Unfortunately, there is an age cap at receiving or qualifying for bonds and grants. But if you happen to be, able to collect, please look into it. You do require to have the DTCC, which is the Disability Tax Credit Certificate, and you're able to backdate and qualify from the year that you were first injured that you qualify for. And it's kind of huge because if you happen to be, let's say you got injured at 25, and you happen to be low income, you can qualify to a maximum for the government bond. It's maximum 20,000, so $1,000 a year if you happen to be low income. And with the grants, if you happen to be able to make maximum contribution yearly of $1,500 a year for the next 20 years, and you stay low income, you can actually qualify and receive the maximum $70,000 of grants from the federal government. So if you happen to be young and you get injured, please look into the Registered Disability Savings Plan, because I don't want people to miss out on their earning potential by missing out on those bonds and grants if you happen to qualify for them. So there's a quick little plug for the RDSP program. Heather did touch upon the importance of wills and stuff like that. So I do come from a little bit of banking background. I did work for SCI BC for 5 years, many years ago. But estate planning isn't just for later in life, and it's never too early to begin. A will is something that is really important to have. Heather did mention that here in BC, you actually only require 2 witnesses for your will to be valid here in BC, but definitely please do your research and look into it, the different options that you can look into. There's also, depending on which financial institution you use, they do offer what they call an estate checklist. Because, and it's always good to sort of start your list of what assets you do have. Certain assets in your state can pass directly to your beneficiary without having to go through probate. Probate is when, in case anything happens to you, typically everything goes into an estate, your estate. But typically there are certain things that can bypass the estate and not have to go through probate, meaning your beneficiary will not have to pay tax on it. So it's really, really important to do the estate planning as well. If you have a life insurance policy, typically you are able to name a beneficiary. That fund will go directly to your beneficiary and will not have to pay taxes. So it's really to have, if you have any GICs, guaranteed investment certificates, a tax-free savings account, you actually can name beneficiary on those types of accounts. So it will go directly to your beneficiary. So those are sort of important things to keep in mind, I would say. Heather did mention earlier in the presentation that there is a discount on ICBC insurance. They actually offer a 25% discount on basic auto plan for your vehicle owners. So your vehicle has to be registered under your name, and there is a form that you will be required to fill out. So there's lots of little savings you can do here and there, because affordability is tough for people like us. So the more you can keep more money in your pockets, I say is a good thing. It's a happy thing. Well, yeah, I mean, Heather mentioned that we have great resources on the Spinal Cord Injury BC website. The info line is available to you. Heather is there. And I highly, don't be afraid to ask for help or ask people, ask peers, connect with our peers at Spinal Cord Injury BC. Yeah, it's just there's so many different programs out there. Unfortunately, it's not the easiest. They may not be always easy to find or understand. So please do your research and never be afraid to ask questions. There's lots of people in the community. Spinal Cord Injury BC is an amazing place to ask. So yeah, those are probably the biggest tips that I could offer people. Always, and if you are a newly injured person, your best bet will definitely be a social worker to guide you, hopefully, on what's best when it comes to funding. And definitely weigh your options before you make a decision and sign anything.
Well, we have a couple questions that kind of came up in the chat, so I thought I'd just read them out. I know there were some answers that we gave, but just in case there was any elaboration, that would be helpful. One of them was like, how can we get some support for private home care?
Yeah, so if you find yourself needing personal care, I would actually start with the health authority because for most people, it's going to be the cheaper option. See what they can provide and then supplement with paying privately if you're able to, but definitely start with your health authority. So you would call your local home and community care case manager and ask for an assessment for personal care in your home, or for CECL if you're looking at going for directed funding. That's a little bit more work, but also a little bit more flexibility. So pros and cons. But if you're not sure, call Infoline and we can talk through your situation ahead of time and help to guide you towards the pros and cons of your different options.
I am, and this is more of a comment, and thank you both for your presentation, which really provided lots of information. The other thing is just to let people know, when you create a rep agreement, you can have two people. Because I have two sons, and I have one that I was unable to make my decisions. He'd make sure that there was music and trees and sunshine, and the other one would say, is this good economically? So you can have both.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. You need people you trust, but you also need people who are knowledgeable about how to get what you need. So in my family situation, my brother and I are both named as an either or on our parents' documents. But I do the medical care decision making, partly because I'm in the same community, partly because I'm better at it. He's
Yeah,
better with the financial stuff than like the nitty gritty of bank accounts and whatnot. So he does that, but he doesn't know the social programs and the funding that might be available for seniors. So I do that part of it. So we kind of, thankfully, we get along. So that makes it
yeah,
easier.
exactly.
But you want people that you trust and that have the skills to do what you need to be done. So thank you. That's a good comment.
Yeah, I have a son who's a lawyer, and he'd be
Ah,
the one looking after the finance and stuff. But the other one would be, does she have sunshine? Can she have music?
yes, both very important things.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment, Linda. Another question that came up was, where can I find public assisted living? Do they accept electronic wheelchairs? Wheelchair.
Yeah, so assisted living through the health authority, there's an assessment process, again, that's done by a case manager at your local home and community care office. So they'll look to make sure that you actually qualify for assisted living and then put you on the wait list for your facilities. Now, in terms of powered chairs, yes, powered chairs are allowed in most facilities, but with the caveat that the occupational therapist will likely want to do an assessment to make sure that you're safe using it, both safe for yourself and for the safety of other residents. And that's not to disparage anybody who uses a power chair. It's simply that as some people age, they may lose their ability to safely operate a power chair, such as if they have advanced dementia, or maybe they're losing hand function, or their eyesight is decreasing. There might need to be some safety measures put into place for safe use of that power chair. So the occupational therapist will reserve the right to do that assessment. But if you ever get denied access to your power chair, come and talk to me. I've assisted a number of people with this issue, and they have to go through quite a process to deny you access to your power chair. It's not a simple process. They have to prove that you're a significant danger to yourself or others. So, short answer, yes, power chairs are allowed. Longer answer, assessments may be required, and you may have to advocate a bit, but it is definitely possible to have one.
Yeah, I have a few questions, I guess. If I was to get a social worker, like how would I find somebody? And then also, is it something that would be covered? Or is it something that you have to pay for?
So the answer is it depends. Like most things through our public health system, access is limited to people who need it most. So if you're going through a program such as GF Strong, either inpatient or outpatient, you definitely have access to social work through that. You may have access through a community health center or through your home and community care, depending on what your issues are. The expectation is that most people are going to manage without one, so that social work time is focused on people who are at the highest level of need in the community. But if you're in hospital or you're in an inpatient or outpatient program, definitely there will be access through that.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, I'm not sure whether this is actually really relevant to this session, but with the RDSP account, does it work similarly to like a TFSA where you get like tax-free investment growth? And then if so, like what's the cap? Is there a cap for something like that?
But so yes, investments inside the registered disability savings plan grow tax-free while in the plan, just like a tax-free savings account. Now, taxes are only applied when funds are withdrawn, but very complicated if you ever do need to withdraw from your RDSP account, and obviously you'll have to the calculations have to be done by a financial advisor at where you opened your RDSP account typically. And there is a maximum amount in the RDSP. Just give me 1 second, I'll find. So there is a lifetime maximum of 200,000 per beneficiary.
Just kind of going off of that answer there, Barry. Do you mean that you have to pay, like you pay taxes on it regardless of the age you pull it out? Or
No, so
Yeah.
it's tax sheltered
Yeah.
up to the point where you start withdrawing from it. And if you
Right. So
withdraw
it doesn't matter
to,
how
yeah,
old you are, right? Like,
yeah.
just yeah. And I guess it depends on how much you are taking out at a time.
Yeah, the withdrawal process for the RDSP is complex because of the potential bond and grant that you had qualified for, right? So if you withdraw too early, there are penalties
Right.
involved.
Right.
Now, the RDSP does work a little differently than a typical RRSP. You actually have to start with withdrawing from it at 59. So the program does work a little bit differently than, very similar, but in a way there's differences.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Barry, it's only available though for young people, not for old guys like me. Because I
Yeah,
was born and they said
unfortunately,
you're too old. But it's
yeah, but
yes.
there's still potential benefits. It could still benefit someone who's older than 49, if they did get injured. So it is worthy to look into whether it could potentially, because everyone's situation is different, right, when it comes to funding. So it's worth it to look into it.
I have a quick question. I put a stair lift at home, but my accountant said I cannot claim the home renovation expense because it's not considered part of construction of the house. Is that true? I cannot claim my stair lift as a home renovation expense. Is that true?
Yeah, so generally, if it's not attached to the structure of the home or doesn't change the structure, then it can't be claimed as a renovation expense. Excuse me, but you may be able to claim it as a medical expense on your taxes and save a little bit of money that way.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
please hold on to. I forgot to remind that when it comes to medical supplies, equipment, etc., please hold on to your receipts because you may be able to write it off. So, as Heather mentioned, that the lift may not have qualified for home renovations, but it is considered equipment, essential equipment for you. So, you will be able to use it for your income tax purposes, right? So, please hold on to your receipts.
And even after you file your taxes, excuse me, hang on to your receipts as well, because there's a likelihood that you could get audited by Canada Revenue. So you want to have that information available to show them afterwards as well.
That's right. Reassessments is very a normal thing that the CRA will do to you. So you might have to provide original receipts when you get reassessed. So it's really important to hold on to all your receipts in general.
I find that every time I get a new wheelchair that I pay partially for myself, that they audit to.
Yeah,
Every single time.
that's right. I mean, even though you've been filing
That's
and you've
right.
had your disability tax credit certificate for 20 years, they will still
right.
reassess you at least every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's horrible.
I just had a question. I guess can you be on both PWD and CPPD, or is it one or the other?
So if you apply for PWD first, that's your better option if you qualify, because then you'll get the extended health. once you're qualified for PWD, the BC government is going to require you to apply for CPP disability. It's not actually going to benefit you as an individual because they will claw back the money. So your total amount per month is actually not going to change. It just means that some is coming from the federal government and some's coming from the provincial government. But they do force you to go through that application process. So yes, you can definitely be on both at the same time.
I'm just thinking, I guess, in terms of equipment, right? Could you have like PWD cover your equipment and then be on CPPD?
You can, but you're not going to get any more than the PWD rate.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
It's probably, if you can, I would defer your your CPP so you can get the maximum amount when you turn 65.
Yeah, so if you qualify for PWD, always apply for PWD first, partly to protect your CPP amounts and partly to get the equipment coverage through BC, because that will save you a lot of money over the long run.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, because Heather mentioned earlier that you don't have coverage under CPP.
Sadly.
Yeah.
While you
should,
do
but
have some coverage for like catheters and basic equipment under PWD.
that's right.
So it's actually a better, and being on PWD are considered low income, which will qualify you actually for more programs, such as like the RDSP program and like technology for independent living, equipment through them, you know, if you need like, for example, a door opener. And if you're low income, you know, you'll definitely qualify for those types of programs.
Thank you everyone for all your questions and engaging in this session today. I personally have a lot to look into. There's a lot that I hadn't even thought about. So I personally found this session pretty helpful. And again, just a reminder that the info line is open to questions such as this. So if there's anything that does come up after this session, do feel free to reach out to the info line and they should be able to assist you with whatever questions you may have. So with that, if no one has any questions, I think I'll just like to thank Heather and Barry again for taking the time to share all that insightful information with us.